So on Thursday, we finished the hangout at our regular time. And at 4:30 p.m., the WWE stock closed at $62.32. At 4:36 p.m., a release was issued announcing that the company was having a management transition. WWE today announced that co-presidents George Barrios and Michelle Wilson will depart the company effective immediately and no longer serve on its board of directors. Frank A. Riddick III, who has served as a member of the board of directors for more than 11 years, has been named interim chief financial officer, reporting to WWE chairman and CEO Vince McMahon. WWE has commenced a search for both a permanent chief financial officer and chief revenue officer. WWE remains well positioned to continue its growth and operate effectively against its strategic priorities, including content creation, distribution, Okay, we get to the end part here that the company expects its full year 2019 adjusted OIBDA to be approximately $180 million. We get a quote here from Vince McMahon thanking George and Michelle for their 10 plus years of service. And then the stock just took a plummet in after hours trading. And by the end of Friday, their stock had fallen 21.5%. It closed on Friday at, just looking here at the actual close, of $48.88. So an enormous drop, a huge on-paper loss for the company. And I think that this is largely just because this is a move that kind of came out of nowhere with two front-facing executives to the public that have been propped up as, as they should be, as the number 2 and number 3 executives in the entire company, and tenured executives at that. I mean, these are two that ascended that ladder, and they created the title of co-presidents for these two years ago. So these, you cannot understate the enormity of this story, and also that it feels as though it was somewhat of a sudden move without a real clear succession plan and anything in place to replace these two key figures. And I think that's the result you're seeing on Wall Street, that they have many, many questions, and that's never a good thing for investors to be confused about what the company is doing.
This is a major story. Thus far, certainly, I think the biggest story in wrestling this year. I would almost think about it as a team is approaching the playoffs, firing their head coach suddenly without anybody else in line. If that were to happen,
and one of the backup coaches is just going to be thrown in there for the playoffs a week before the playoffs start as well, when we have this investors call next week. The timing is really notable, way. The fact that, yes, you have this investors call coming up, but this is also a week out from the launch of the XFL, which, while not a WWE property, it's, at least to the public, you have to imagine that there's that perception that Vince McMahon is going to be spread very thin here with the launch of the XFL, and you're making such a drastic move at a time when it seems that you would absolutely be concerned about Vince McMahon having too much on his plate.
We'll certainly know a lot more, I think, after Thursday next week, whether or not this was a preemptive move done to, I guess, perhaps, ease some of the results of that are to come there. Maybe they'll make an announcement on Thursday by next week. I don't know if we can fully speculate, why they might have been let go or why they might be gone from the company without maybe knowing some of these results.
Well, we can read Vince McMahon's quote in the press release, which included, "I am grateful for all that was accomplished during their tenure, but the board and I decided a change was necessary as we have different views on how best to achieve our strategic priorities moving forward." So that gives you at least some idea of that. They just had a completely different view here. Whether there is something larger to it than that, that's going to be the billion-dollar question, because you have to imagine that just as when you're talking about executives at this level with a company at this level, so much of it is how will this be taken by the stock market? How will the investing community take to this news? That you would think that if one of them was gone, you could at least paint this in a better picture that, well, the other one will be assuming those duties, or the fact that both of them are gone to me is just so shocking, like absolutely shocking.
Well, a healthy company just doesn't up and, gets rid of their bosses, their leaders for no reason. So the fact that something this drastic is happening so close to so many, I think, pivotal dates suggests that something is clearly not right within the WWE universe. And I think the number reflects that tonight.
When they mention in this press release that figure of adjusted OIBDA to be approximately $180 million this year, that's a number that has shrunk throughout the year, because at the onset, their forecast for 2019 was that that figure would be $200 million for the year. Then during the last investors call, that was downgraded to a range of 180 to 190 million. Now they're saying approximately 180. So they're going on the lower end of that estimate. That coupled with the fact that, when we go back to that last investors call, a lot of questions about the India deal, which was set to expire at the end of last year. There's also that television deal in the Middle East, North African region that has still not been completed. I'm sure there's questions about the UK deal and moving from Sky over to BT Sports. And these to me are all interesting subjects to see if they're brought up on this call next week, because I think this is one that to me, this is going to dominate this call next week. I cannot imagine what the Q&A is going to be like, and they have to be prepared to be being hit with all of this. And I think they have a week to really have a strong plan for 2020 to come out in that call with, and be very, very succinct and specific about what their plans are, why this radical change was necessary at this point, and this is our strategic plan forward in a completely different direction. So that's a very important call on Thursday, and I think if they are left unsatisfied, the stock could fall lower. I definitely feel if they don't have a proper message next Thursday.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking more forward to this conference call than any pay-per-view.
This, I think they could charge for this one. Put this on the WWE Network. Mm-hmm. So we will definitely be covering that all day on the site with the earnings report that'll come out early Thursday, the investors call, and then we'll have Brandon Howard from WrestleNomics joining us later that day for the Cafe Hangout. I am patting myself on the back that we booked Brandon ahead of this news dropping. So we'll look very forward to chatting with Brandon. He did a pretty thorough podcast on this over, if you want to just look up WrestleNomics Radio, did over an hour of taking questions about all of the different ramifications. And there's so many to these. When you're talking about George Barrios, who's been with the company since 2008, Michelle Wilson in 2009 joined the company. She initially had a role with the original XFL, and they were very instrumental. In 2008, that's when the company shifted over to the PG format, and you really started to see them change the image of the WWE. That was spearheaded a lot by these two. They were heavily involved with the WWE Network, especially over the last few years, and were set to be kind of the two people tasked with rolling out the tiered system and being the faces that were promoting that aspect of the WWE Network. They were key people involved in the television rights deals that they struck 2 years ago. And the fact that they got to such a level that they created the titles of co-presidents for these two, I mean, that tells you their power in this company. If there was anything that would have taken Vince McMahon away from the company, these two would have been running the business end of this entire thing.
Yeah. I'm sure if they're conducting interviews, they're doing it pretty quickly right now, and maybe more so just focusing on what to say to the public next week.
Yeah, I'm curious if this interim chief financial officer, Frank Riddick III, if he will be present on the call. You would think that if he's going to be there for any substantial amount of time in this role, that, I mean, they probably want to make him front and center here, along with Vince McMahon on this call. So, there's a lot of questions coming out of this. This will certainly not be a story that's just going to last for a couple of days. There's going to be major ramifications from this, and already just seeing the stock drop, it's had an enormous impact on the company. So we will see what all the subjects that are covered next Thursday on that.